A very warm welcome from South Africa to all our viewers this afternoon at live at the watering hole off at Tembe in Maputoland, where we are looking at some of the elephants. And we can see they back under that favorite tree of theirs in the little dust bowl. Now, I'm Jaapie Potgieter and I'm going to be your host for this afternoon. And I am very, very excited for some encounters this afternoon around the water. Yesterday afternoon was quite a surprise, and like this afternoon, also off with quite a few elephants. And we can see some dust getting from a young elephant to the right of the tree, a little bit unsure of what he needs to do. Should he wait? Should he follow his mates? You can see that little bunch, or that bunch of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They look more or less in a similar age category, and with that, I'd say probably within 5 years of each other. So they are very, very, very easily influenced by the behavior of their peers. And then, of course, we got the bigger elephants here on the left, where we got that one elephant with very decent sized tusks. Always a nice thing to see. And also something that Tembe is known for. Kim Faustino, a good evening to you too. I know the time is a little bit different from where I am, but a very good evening to you. And then Fuller, he's saying good morning from the UK. Well, good morning to you too. Yes, it still is morning on your side. Just about. You can see the elephants have already moved into their afternoon routine. Casually standing in the shade, feeding if there's anything nearby to feed. You can see this elephant is chewing on a branch of something, maneuvering it around carefully in his mouth. You can see the tip of his trunk's in. He's probably just repositioning that little branch. Now, I'm not sure what it is, but he's possibly, he was chewing at the base there. Maybe he pulled out a small shrub and he was going after the roots, which is, of course, a very sought after part of certain plants. It's got a lot of moisture and it's often holds a lot of nutrients as well. And Fuller, you were saying it's a wonderful Wednesday around the waterhole. Indeed it is. I think it's going to be a brilliant Wednesday. And no better place to spend the Wednesday afternoon than around the water. Good afternoon to you too, Darcy Miller. Good to see that you are joining us again this afternoon. That's something that I have to say, like one of the things that I enjoy is over the couple of days that you get to have a look at animals around the water, you tend to kind of follow this little, almost like a narrative that's developing with certain creatures, like this particular elephant. See that mark in his ear? He is one that I've seen around here. And look at those warthog. Yeah, and there we have a kingfisher. Not sure if I'd have to take guess it's probably a brown hooded. Or a striped. My apologies. A striped kingfisher, not a brown hooded. And he's got a good spot. A very, very clever perch. And notice he's a little bit further away from the water. He's not right on the water's edge. There's something about these kingfishers. Not all kingfishers eat fish, like their name suggests. Most of them actually eat insects. That old duck had some, I can see they covered in mud, both of these, so they definitely had a wallow. Probably in that little spot there right above the one on the left. They usually go for a shallower spot right next to the water's edge, an area that's trampled, sometimes by the larger animals like the elephant and the buffalo and the rhino that come in. And like the elephants, they need to protect their skin. And they do so through covering it with mud. Now it looks like it's slightly cloudy here in Maputo land, and that would mean that it's probably pretty humid. It's just part of the reason why these elephants are flapping their ears, why their tails are wagging vigorously like that. It's also near the water and lots of animal droppings, so there will be a lot of flying insects. And yes, even though they have a thick skin, they are very sensitive. So it's interesting. The ones that's not standing in the shade, all of them are actively busy trying to cover themselves with some sand, create a little thin barrier between the harsh rays of the sun and the skin. But what a great start. I would like to remind our viewers that this afternoon is also live and interactive. And of course, you can send through questions to /questions, or you can scan the QR code on the screen and you can let me know what you'd like to talk about, if there is anything in particular, or anything that you might want to see. And then you can also join the conversation on X using #WildEarth. Or you can join the conversation on YouTube at FC, and then you can send through some comments. And that is quite... I was hoping there for a moment. It looked like that big elephant was just about to try and reach a little higher. Convenient having a long tusk like that. You can just drape your trunk over, and that is sometimes also a sign of the elephant being a little bit uncomfortable in the heat. But he's got a good scratching post there. And like I said, I was hoping that he might reach a little bit higher. Now I know there's some regions in particular, like some areas in northern Zimbabwe and northern South Africans are actually known for standing on their hind legs to try and reach for those higher branches and then pull them down. But I've also seen it in a number of different places, and depending on what type of tree it is and what time of the year, if the tree's fruiting, an elephant that's capable will certainly attempt it. And it's quite a sight to see such a large animal awkwardly standing on his hind legs. But I can't help but wonder if that's what happened to the one branch in the big tree on the warthog side of the watering hole. Obviously provided the weavers with the best possible nesting site. Oof, and there's some elephants coming out of the water. The bulls. Oh, and there's another recognizable fellow in this area. That young bull there with the tear in the ear. I know that he does like to swim a little bit. It looks like it's mainly the younger guys that go into the water and swim here. I haven't seen one of the big elephants in the water, but just because I haven't seen it, I'm pretty sure it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. Okay, well, this is a brilliant start so far. Watching relaxed elephants cooling down as they do this time of the day. So we're going to head over to Safari Hook where we've got some more elephants. What a complete difference. And what an interesting contrast to the previous site we had. Completely different landscape, much more arid. And also in Namibia, of course, different elephants. That looks very dry and draining here. And I think these elephants are so thankful for this bit of water. As you can see, it's got clumpy mud all over their skin, and with not too much else to interact with in the environment, they are checking each other out. However, actually now, no, come to think of it, I can see now actually there's a water inlet there. So the other one's waiting its turn. But just look at that. Look at the dust coming up from the antelope making their way down to the water. So more elephant bulls. I can see what looks like an Amakwa dove. Petricorvus, you said you only found this channel yesterday. Well, welcome, and I'm very happy that you come to join us and that you're loving it. See, that elephant's made sure to cover himself properly with some water and mud. And have a look, he's putting his trunk deep down into the water, and I can see, oh, there we can see the not just the color, but also the way it travels through the air. It's clumps of very, very wet, loose mud. So he's literally digging at the bottom of this dam to get to that wet mud. No, he's just checking something out. So amazing. Trunk tip is just above her. When the tail stops, that's usually the best indication that an elephant's paying attention to something else. And I think the commotion that we're hearing now is probably what drew his attention. Look at all the springbok. And indeed it was. Two very exciting exit elephant bulls. Done drinking, and now it's time to fool around and cool down. Quite the spectacle to the springbok. Well, either that or the springbok's longingly looking at that patch of green grass in the middle of the island. Now, I am curious to see whether the elephants would eat that. I know that these landscapes, the soils are often quite high in salts. And the animals in this region is very well adapted to handle that pretty well, like the springbok, for instance. And springboks, funnily enough, obtain quite a lot of their moisture from the little plants or unique plant life that we find in regions like this. But when there's water available, like all animal, they will go down to have a drink. Hilary B from the UK. You're saying good morning to you too in the UK there. I think you got about another 10 minutes of morning left. But you're saying that you'd really hope to see that cheetah again. I would too. I would certainly be very, very excited if we do get to have a glimpse of it again today. Or maybe even not the exact same one, but another one. So while these springboks are trying to find a good spot to drink and the elephant's bathing, we're going to head over to Hunkoro and see what we have there this afternoon. Nice big male giraffe. Feeding on what I believe to be a tamboti. Oof, that's quite an interesting thing. I see on the slide near the front left leg. It looks like there's a very big bulge on the side of the animal, possibly a hernia of some sorts. And here we have our lonely hippo again. This hippopotamus had some visitors yesterday afternoon, and elephants came down to drink. And for a moment there, we looked quite nervous. But yeah, I would like to, if we can have another look at this giraffe. It's quite an interesting thing. You can see there where the oxpeckers are sitting. It looks like there's a very large bulge. Now, I'm not sure. It could be a hernia of some sorts. It could have been from a wound sustained through a fight with another big male giraffes like that. You can see that one is very tall, and it's often the big males that will stand up like that, turn their head straight up. The base of their skull is designed to be able to be kept quite upright and reach the higher up leaves. Now you can see there, and if there is any sort of opening or a wound opening or any bodily fluids leaking, of course the oxpeckers would be on that, and as I can see they are. There's quite a few of them. It looks like 3 or 4. Injuries in and around the legs and the belly and the flanks, for and especially then on the heads as well, but for big male giraffes is not uncommon. Now that's probably a combination of factors there, maybe with an infection, but either way it looks quite uncomfortable. Looks like it's affecting the gait of the animal slightly. Still a magnificent creature. So let's see, he's heading into another tree. This looks a little different. Just look at that. You can see that the head's almost straight up. And then using that very long prehensile tongue to cover whatever little distance is left to grab the succulent leaves. And giraffes being one of the few that can eat tamboti leaves. Tamboti tree, the leaves contain a toxic latex. There's very few creatures that actually eat it. But we can see those branches are very high up, and there's not much else that would be able to get to those. The lower ones are stripped, so it's possible that there have been other male giraffes in the area. But what I also find amazing is they cover that gap between the trees quite quickly, and then the little bit of shade being such a tall, straight up animal, they tend to utilize shade very effectively, even if it's a small patch. And a giraffe can stand up while resting, so you can stay cool that way. But sure, it looks like now that I'm looking on the side of this giraffe, it looks like it's coming from the leg itself and not actually from the animal's belly and flank area. So that makes me think that it's more than likely an injury from a fight. Maybe then got a little bit septic, and then a very, very severe infection started inside there. But giraffe, funnily enough, have incredibly thick skin, especially male giraffes. And often what happens, very similar to elephants, because of that thick skin, if there's an infection that occurs between the different layers, then often it doesn't actually open the infected area up, and it doesn't create an open wound. It sits there and it festers and it grows to the point where you'll see these very large bulging shapes, especially around the legs of the animals. But that thick skin of the giraffe, for people, the hunter gatherers long ago, had a very, very good way of using all parts of the animals they hunted. Giraffe being a very large animal and often well adapted to the drier areas, was a well sought after prize. So, hunting with bow and arrow, one of the best twines for arrow strings was made from the skin of the giraffe and the sinews from the back. Well, on second thought, now looking at it again, maybe it's just my eyes pricks, and maybe the bulge just gave me the idea that his gait was affected, but I don't think so. I think it is at an awkward spot, and I can't imagine that it's too comfortable. But he looks okay, and he doesn't seem bothered by it too much. Reader, you asking, or you saying that you're quite intrigued by giraffe movements, and you're asking why they would be moving different than most mammals, and you're saying that it looks like their balance might be affected that way. So, and then you're also asking about advantages and disadvantages. So, it is an interesting thing. It's such a large animal, and often with animal movements, what we see and what actually happens is also different. Um, with a giraffe always has to have one foot at least on the ground when it's walking through. But because it's such a tall animal, It looks a little bit deceiving, and it looks to us like it's moving the two legs on the same side of the body, where if you had to slow it down slow as possible, you'd be able to see that it does have similarities to the way other antelopes move. But while this giraffe is feeding in a small patch of shade there, we're going to head over to King's Camp. And what a spectacular view of some curious young elephants. I love how these little elephants are wading into the water and almost like carefully watching before they put their next step down. And kind of testing with the trunk a little bit further out. Now I'm wondering, I can see a terrapin there. I just saw the head of a terrapin pop up, and I'm curious to know if maybe it might be that they've actually spotted that little terrapin and it's just a little bit wary. Or maybe in a situation like this where they have the option, they're just looking for the less muddied water. What an amazing watering hole this is. Gives us quite a few angles of these animals, and sometimes they come right up to the camera. But it's interesting that most of them have come into the water and moving back out, where this one is walking all the way around. It's moving quite quickly. It looks like it wants to catch up. Charmed Chaos. You saying hands yellow, heart red. So you needed to see some elephants today. And indeed we got to see some. Spectacular elephants. There's some nice close views there. I'm not sure what you mean with hands yellow, heart red. I would love to know what you mean with that, but I'm very happy that we got to see some elephants. It looks like it's quieted down, and once again this Egyptian goose has got its watering hole to itself. But let's head over to Founders Camp for the first time this afternoon. Where we have a relaxed white rhino in the shade. What a sight. That looks too good. It looks very hot there. You can see he's perfectly positioned in the shade. He's on his flank. So there's a little bit of sun still coming through, and then we can see there's a hot oxpecker sitting on him. You can see the beak is open. The bird's also quite hot, so it must be really hot. There's a wet warthog. That's quite the shot. But the rhino does look like he's been down to the mud, so he's probably decided to cool down further by laying in the shade. You can still see the ears moving, like little radars covering all sides. And then of course, just as we got here at Founders, I've noticed that he shifted his side that he was laying on. So big animal like this, there we go, there's another shift. Big animal like this, white rhino bull, potentially, I'm saying that only because it's such a large, but I'm not sure about that. They are very, very heavy. The heaviest land mammal after elephants, and due to their bulk and size, if they lay down for too long on one side, that could affect the circulation, so they need to move regularly. Look at these warthogs. Young ones playing around. They gave the rhino a bit of a spook. There's another one behind the rhino. By the looks of it, they've got him completely surrounded. So in this case, this might actually startle him. I mean, he's already aware of their presence. He knows, not just from hearing them, but at this distance you can also see them. But when animals that get tolerated by larger animals around and they get too close, sometimes they could startle, especially rhinoceros. They get startled quite easily for such a large animal. And then what I find quite amazing is the relationship between the rhino and the birds. Now, being a large animal moving through thick bush and tall grass, they can easily pick up quite a bit of ticks, which is what those birds are after. And it'll be worth their while to sit in the rhino for as long as they can during the day. Look at these birds. He's got quite a hairdo, covered himself in mud, covered himself in dust. like the angle of the camera at this watering hole. But I think while that rhino is relaxing in the shade, we're going to head back to Safari Hook. And here we've got quite a few giraffe and an oryx. This is quite a sight, quite a change from the elephant and the springbok. There's one giraffe laboring to get down in the middle behind the dead stump or the dead tree. This is quite a decent group by the looks of it. It looks like a couple of females there, so it's probably a group traveling together. You can see the gaps between them as they spread out around the watering hole, allowing for each other to get adequate space. And then look at that very, very impressed and lucky blacksmith lapwing there in the middle of the water on the island. What a good spot. Certainly pays to have wings. I would say that's probably the perfect spot for nesting, protected from most predators. And that's quite a sight. 4 giraffes drinking at once. And it's interesting, the one right in the middle that's lifted her head. Her front legs are just spread out wide, where the others have a little bit of a bend to get down all the way. Where hers is just spread apart. Quite an interesting tactic. I'm wondering if it's got to do with the rocks on the edge there. Some very good looking oryx. In and amongst them, it's quite interesting. I'm watching carefully now. I can see some springbok moving around, and then in the background, it looks like it's either another oryx or something else coming down. Looks like another oryx. But this landscape is quite deceiving. Those dried out trees in the back looked a lot further away at first, but now I realize they're not that far away, and animals easily disappear into them and come out of them. An aspect that these giraffe would be very aware of. Well, all of the animals drinking here, but because it means that they, if normal plant-eating animals can come in and out of it that easily, of course predators can too. Just have a look at that. I'm wondering, these giraffes must have traveled quite a bit to get here. I don't see any taller trees around, and that's why I'm sure they'll take this chance properly to their moisture requirements. But the two larger ones, the one here on the right and another one further to the left, they look like they might actually be pregnant, which is not uncommon in a group of giraffes like this with the females, to have one or two that might be pregnant. But and I'm wondering not why they took such a while to actually bend down, because I've noticed both of those giraffes actually did struggle a bit to get down and have a drink, or they were like almost hesitant, but not in the way that they were nervous about something else approaching, more in the way that it would physical labor. But this watering hole is certainly must be a lifeline for the animals in this region. Especially for the larger animals with higher water requirements. And I like watching giraffe drink. When they bring up their heads afterwards, they usually lick the area around the lips and the nostrils clean. You can see some vigorous tongue movements. Making sure that they get whatever moisture is on there. And that part of the face is also quite sensitive. It's got these very sensitive hairs attached to it's got a very sensitive nerve ending. And they can feel if there's something that's sitting on and in and around the lip area. look at that one. You can see he's cleaning his balls with his or with her tongue. So a very, very, very useful thing to a giraffe, the long tongue, not just in feeding, but also helping in keeping the nasal area clean. Petricorvus, you've asked earlier how many watering holes have cameras at them. So it's around about 30. It chop and changes a little bit as sometimes we experience a little bit of technical difficulties here and there, and that can be due to various reasons, and some of them also due to the attention of some animals, like the elephants, but quite a lot. So it does provide quite a few options to jump around between. Now, there might not always be something happening at all of them, and some of them gets busy at different times. And then, of course, it also depends on the time of the season. So this time of the season, when it's very, very dry in the southern African regions, we do tend to see some good action around the watering hole. Mindy Walking Girl Tillipau, you're saying giraffes are your favorite? Yay! They are certainly one of my favorites. They certainly are. And it's interesting. I never really, when I started out working in the bush and doing safaris, I never really paid sufficient attention to them. They were always nice to see, and but it always kind of had this idea that they're around. We'll get to see them, and they're more part of the general game. But they certainly fascinating creatures, and I've been trying to pay a lot more attention to them in the last few years. They are fascinating to watch for long periods of time. They are interesting in a lot of ways. One of my favorite things about them is that they have been quite understudied in terms of their behavior in the wild. And there was a lot of assumptions made about group structures and things like that in the past, even though there have been some proper studies, long term studies as well, but it's just never really made it into common knowledge streams like the behavior and the facts that gets thrown around about other, I guess, in some ways more appealing animals. Or maybe not more appealing, that's not the right description. I just say some maybe more popular animals like the big cats, the elephants, or the big five. But giraffe certainly deserves the same amount of attention, and they're certainly just as fascinating. In fact, their numbers have dropped under everybody's noses drastically, and there's some of the different genetic groups that's quite endangered in certain parts of Africa. Look at that one. It picked up its head, just folded its ears back and slightly squinted its eyes. So accustomed to having dust storms blowing in its face. It's amazing to see those small little adaptations. He was licking the moisture off the lips as he lifted his head, and then the dust came blowing in, so he just stood there for a little longer licking. These are also quite beautiful antelope, and I haven't had the chance to study too much in the wild. I've been fortunate to see them. So that's quite interesting. It looks like that oryx is licking something. It's quite interesting, and it might be that it's just maybe licking to get some minerals that's gathered on that rock. But as these oryx are moving off, we're gonna go see what's happening at Aldonio this afternoon. Sure, what a sight. That's an impressive elephant, the one on the right. The other two in the water. It looks like the water levels dropped quite a bit at Aldonio from yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. I know elephants drink a lot and they've got very high water requirements, but I highly doubt it's because of that. Sandy Franklin, you are asking, well, first of all, good morning to you in the US, but you're asking if giraffes really have blue tongues. So giraffes, especially the first part of their tongue, is a little bit darker. I wouldn't say it's quite blue, more of like a dark purple color. And it's very well lubricated with saliva. But there is a theory that suggests that it is, or it's got darker pigmentation, and that is for a little bit of extra protection due to the fact that they do spend a lot of time feeding in the day, and they often feed out in the open sun. So an organ like the tongue would definitely be exposed to the sun and potentially even get burned or get affected in other ways, potentially get dried out easily. So the darker pigmentation does help a little bit with that. I love how that elephant's just decided to move into the middle of the water and pushing the others out. So you can just hear them slurping from those waters. And I think that's what that elephant's done, is he's moved around to hog that inlet. Luckily there's another one for the others to use. And this one in front just needs to wait his turn. So there's the oryxes. So just an interesting thing about these oryxes. The ones that we saw at Safari Hook in Namibia, they are different. They genetically isolated and different from these ones. These ones in East Africa, and there are one or two slight differences in their coloration. Victor, you're asking how often the water's filled. So it depends on the watering hole. Some of these watering holes don't get filled, they actually get pumped. And in others, they have to bring in water and they'll fill them whenever they get dry. Now, during the dry season and the height of the dry season, elephants make more regular visits to the water, and that would mean that they'd have to fill it quite regularly. But this particular watering hole here at Aldonio is pumped. I am not sure why there's so little water in it today. It might be the inlets might be blocked a little bit, or maybe there is an issue with the pump, but I can see water running down there on both sides, so I'm assuming maybe the pressure is just down. Sandy Franklin, you're asking when the rainy season will start. Now, in South Africa, our rain season is technically about to start. We've already had a little bit to start, but it was mainly a little bit of spit, not so much rain. But it starts in the Lowveld area, and in Southern Africa, it usually starts around October, and then starts to increase in November, December, all the way to April. But, well, these elephants, well, it looks like they're moving out of the water now. Maybe they'll give this oryx and zebra a chance to drink, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to head over to Tau Lodge and see what's happening there this afternoon. An elephant with her calf. And they look like they've just had a mud bath. And she's carrying a stick off. I wonder what would be the reason for her. Okay, she is feeding on it. Maybe there's a bit of bark to chew. But look how closely that little one's moving to its mom. It looks a little fed up with the heat. You can see the mom's paying quite a lot of attention to it as well. Like there was a brief stop there, just checking back, making sure everything's okay. I was busy talking about the rain seasons as per a question from Sandy Franklin earlier. So the rain season in East Africa is a little bit different from here in Southern Africa. Over there you've got two. You've got one from March to May and then from October to December. I'm not 100% sure, but if I'm not mistaken, October to December might be less rain than what's received during March to May. But two distinct seasons. Where in South Africa, in certain parts, especially this region where Tau is situated, this heads into like a very, very dry interior part of the southern part of the African continent. I'm not sure why she turned around there. Maybe she picked up on something. Maybe they're waiting for others that we haven't seen. That's quite a few wildebeest moving down there. Ooh, there's a lot of young ones at the back. Interesting that the larger animals are the ones that's moving in front. You can see that male proudly leading the way. R. Lara Moore, you're saying it's interesting how horses, rabbits, and cows make use of offered salt and mineral blocks. Um, Cats, yes, cats are very sensitive to salt. Phew, look at this. This is turning out to be extremely busy here at Tau, and this is. Now, I've talked about this a little bit in the past, but this is that kind of that timekeeping or slot that each group of animals in the region kind of fit in. They kind of head down to the water whenever they can to make sure that there's not too much interaction. It looks like two distinct groups of elephants coming down. Those elephants obviously would have come from a lot further out. And then of course the young elephant bulls like this one in the water. But that's probably why that elephant and her calf turned around. It's because they've noticed all these elephants coming down. Yo, what a sight. Ian, you are asking how much do Ellies need to eat and drink to be able to feed their little ones. Now, that's a good question because it's difficult. I don't actually know an exact amount, but I would imagine that for a growing calf requiring its regular meals of milk a day, the mother would have to be at her optimal condition. And for that, she would have to have her optimal requirements, which on a hot day where they're a little bit more active might be as much as more than 150 to 200 liters of water, minimum of about 100 liters. And the same with eatings. She could potentially have as much as more than 150 kilograms of wet material a day. And that can go up to about 200 kilograms depending on the size of the animal. It roughly equates to about 6% of their body weight. Have a look. First things first, coming down to muddy themselves, cool down. The little ones can lay down. I think the older ones probably wish they could. You can see elephants enjoying the mud. For the wildebeest, it looks like it's a bit of a challenge. Yeah, but it's busy here around Tao's watering hole this afternoon. Madikwe is certainly giving us a good show here. And that blacksmith lapwing seemed to have given the wildebeest a bit of a fright. Now I'm assuming because of all the elephant activity and all the other animals coming around, like some of them are a little nervous. The bee. Well, with this animal feast here at Madikwe, or at Tao, going ahead, I think we'll have some activity later. So for now, we're going to head over to Lentori. where we have a baboon. A big, looks like a very, very, very big male baboon. You can see from the coat and the size compared to this little one. See a lot of butterflies flying around. You can see a lot of leaves and things in the water. But judging from this baboon's very relaxed nature, there's probably no crocs in this little pond. And just look at that. Looks like one or two females is also around. You can see these big male baboons always walking with an air of confidence, picking out the females whenever they move past. Now looks like quite a comfortable spot this. There's another big male baboon. It's interesting. I would love to know what the size of this troop is, but often a big troop does have quite a few big male baboons, and they might ensure that there's a healthy amount of competition between them. But it would also aid in the protection, meaning that the more big males, the more scouts, and the more well protected a troop like this can be. But that was very nice to check in and to see a troop of baboons. But we're going to head back to Tao to see how it's going with all the animals there. Well, we still have quite a number of elephants. It looks like that herd that we saw coming down to mud themselves earlier is moving out. They might go to drink at another spot, but look at this bull elephant and how well he's managed to cover himself with mud. All the elephants around, it certainly limits the spots for the wildebeest to drink, and there's a lot of wildebeest around, a lot of zebra as well. You can see a few big wildebeest in and amongst the zebra at the back. Now I am assuming that those ones might be territorial males that's already starting to separate themselves from the groups, and they would probably keep a watchful eye over the patches that they're standing at. But look at that. Look how that little elephant is climbing onto that mud bank and stretching himself as far as he can to get some more clean water there. Shame, it looks like a really, really young one. Old enough to be able to use its trunk properly. probably around about a year, more or less. These little elephants take quite a while to learn to use their trunk. But as one can imagine, it's a very handy and helpful tool. There is lots of muscles, it's wrist, and used for so many different things. So it only makes sense. And it can take anything from about 6 months up to a year to properly learn how to use it. Kim Foster, no, you're saying the baby Ellie is so cute as it follows its mom. That is true. I think a baby Ellie is such an amazing little creature to watch, and a lot of their knowledge stems from watching the baby mom. There's a very active water buck moving through the muddy parts down here. Quite nice to see the water buck here, Tau, living up to their name. That's water buck. Sometimes in the low veld, I often see them just standing around near areas where there used to be proper water. But in areas where they can and they do find marshier sections, you do find that they sometimes wade into the water. And being that tolerant of water means that they can utilize the green grass that grows on the mud here. But it's nice to see lots of baby elephants this afternoon. You can see how closely those two are standing to their mothers, literally just checking every step of the way. And they also learn from the other females in the group, not just their mother, but predominantly from their mother. And the largest part of elephant behavior is formed through learned experience from an early age. And I find it amazing to think that if it's a little female, she will spend most of her life within proximity of her mother. Danny, you're asking me how do I differentiate between the elephant herds? And with that, I'm assuming maybe you might be referring to me having seen elephants come down earlier and saying that it's possibly two herds. Well, I'm gonna be honest. At best, it's a guess from my side. There are ways that you can tell, and in this particular region, elephant herds are generally not as large. And because of the fact that this is near water, the likelihood of them encountering other herds coming down to drink at the same time is very high. What I usually look for is I would look for a general male, which would usually be a few larger elephant cows, a few younger ones, and then, of course, now the babies usually walk close to their mothers, and that is something we'll notice quite quickly when you look at an elephant herd. If there are a lot of babies, and you look carefully, you'll notice that they generally tend to stick close to their mothers. So if there is an elephant cow and there's a young baby next to her, if she fits within the age group that could potentially breed, then chances are very good that the baby is at females. However, they can occasionally move with other members of the group, slightly older, more experienced members. But when they're very, very young, they'll tend to stick close to the mother because they need to drink regularly. So, what I look for is these little clumps, and you can see they'll move because they have different leaders, and the different matriarchs would make different decisions. And elephants tend to get a little stressed out from overcrowding. So, generally, a small group of related elephants, I mean, in extreme cases, can go up to about 20 animals or maybe a little bit more, but it very rarely goes to more than that. And it could potentially, if herds get too big and they split off, some of the other older cows might move away and form their own herds. Then you might find congregations where those groups can increase. But it also depends on available resources. Sometimes they'll congregate into very, very large herds. And that would be out of common interest and potentially relation. But what I've noticed here at Tau is that the groups are smaller. It's usually one or two big females, maybe three, and then their offspring, maybe one or two of their offspring. Dark Main Lover, you saying hello? Hello to you too. It's good to see that you're back and watching the show. But yes, that elephant herd was very, very beautiful. The four standing there on the edge of the water, could clearly see there was the two mothers and their young. And then the waterbuck, moving through the muddy marshes that's left here at Tau. Look at those wildebeest all clumped together. And along with that waterbuck, they look like they're just staring at each other, watching each other's moves very, very carefully. Now, there is quite a lot of interest shown between different herds, even though they might not be related. But animals do learn quite a lot from watching others. So they learn certain resources. Watching other animals' behavior could alert them to potential threats. And then, of course, if you have a wildebeest male like this guy on his own, there's probably not much else to do than stare at the other animals, especially if you've got a good view in this open space. And the onslaught continues. That poor tree In proximity to the water, of course, it's got a regular source and access to water, but of course, it's a good indication of how a certain position could influence certain factors, of course, with the elephants coming down and nothing else that green in the area. It is a very welcome treat. But let's have a look at this little baby dusting himself. You can see he's quite wet on the one side, so he's had a good mud bath. And by the looks of it, he even picked up some soil in his mouth. Look at that. Now, I am wondering if he's not actually actively trying to eat some soil there. Just look at that. And little one is literally using all its aids in the environment here. The dust, even eating a bit of soil or ingesting a bit of soil. And then this brilliant scratch post. It's got some nice sharp points, as we can see that elephant on the left using it very effectively in the flanks, getting into that tough to reach areas. And the little one also using it to its benefit. Erica Oldno, I'm very happy that you are enjoying my calm voice. I'm happy that I'm sounding calm. I think the scene here at Tau is quite calm currently, even though it's such a lot of animals around. And in a big way, it speaks quite a lot about how tolerant they are of conditions and understanding their situation quite well, knowing that they need to be tolerant of each other. A lot of animals around a watering hole can be a bit chaotic at points. Ian, you're asking which animals are my favorite to photograph when I'm on safari. It's difficult to say. I I think the photo kind of, you get those moments where you can't really, no matter what the animal is, you kind of have to take the photo. But I'd probably say that I do enjoy photographing rhinos and also cats, any of the cats, especially the lion when they're laying sleeping. They can make for some very, very interesting poses. Just look at that little one now. He's got a stick. At this point, I think he's probably just standing, waiting to move. You can see he's just investigating the environment. He probably relies quite a bit on mom's milk still, so eating off the tree is probably not as much as the older ones, but we've had an amazing scene here with all elephant behaving differently. So let's head over to Cat's Eye Pan, where we've got another bunch of elephants. Oh, we've got one elephant. So a very, very relaxed elephant. Oh no, we do. We've got two elephants at least. Just testing the water there. And I'm enjoying hearing those sounds. Something soothing and calming about the sounds of the animals slurping up the water, casually spraying it in the back of their throats. While striking a very pose there. You can see it's just resting the front leg. Concentrating on drinking. I guess also maybe giving a foot a bit of a rest from the hot soil. This is an interesting view of an elephant. A clear view of its backside. Interesting indeed. Can be quite an odd looking animal if you look at it compared to some other animals. I mean, they are amazing to watch, but they certainly have some peculiarities. And we can see that very pronounced spine running all the way from the base of a tail. Very long tail hair. And then the flat feet. And back legs, it's shorter than its front legs. And this elephant's just standing there, and I'm assuming he's probably just waiting for the other one to finish having a drink. And just casually putting the trunk down on the ground to sniff it. Try and pick up on any chemical cues of who else might have come around here. It looks like it's wet where that starling's hopping in front of the elephant. There is a rumble. I've rumbled there's just a bit of communication. Maybe either encouraging the other one to start moving with them. It's possible that he might have picked up on either elephants approaching or communicating the fact that there were other elephants here recently and that it might be useful to follow them. I'm always amazed at the companionship between male elephants that travel together. I mean, they might not be related, but they still show a degree of respect to each other. They wait for each other, even if it's in the general area. But it does look like there's been quite a bit of elephant activity around here. And even looking at that dung now, it looks like it's reflecting a bit of sunlight, so it might have some moisture left in too long. Now, it would be interesting to see when they do start to move, if they're going to move into that general direction or not. See, now the other ones also come round to investigate that same spot. And this is how they actively use that incredible sense of smell to track others in the region. There you can hear communicating a plan. Okay, let's follow up. Looks like these tracks are rather. These animals might be nearby. Who knows? Maybe there's a female in that group that might be in heat. Maybe it is elephants that they know. But now, as they're moving off in the direction of where the others might have, let's head to Oldonyo and see what's happening there. And we're back with a number of big elephant bulls. This pan is quite popular. I always find it funny at Oldonyo when it's very busy with elephants around the watering hole. You see all the other animals gathering in quite large numbers around, just hanging on the outskirts, waiting their time. And one thing about living out here is animals, especially, they often, one of the many skills needed to survive out there is patience. Now, we're gonna head over to Tower Lodge. And just look at those elephants moving off. It's very busy here, Tower, today. I'm enjoying this. I think we had a bit of an unstable signal there at Oldonyo, so we came this side, but not to worry. Got lots of elephants here as well. So have a look. You see they're carefully approaching that side, and the elephant in front has got a trunk up, so she is just testing the air. And on that note, there was a question from Ian asking how far can elephants pick up smells in the bush. Now, Ian, that's a very good question, and it's difficult to give a straight answer, but it would be far. I wouldn't be able to put an exact distance to it. They've got an excellent sense of smell, and they can pick up on the minutest of chemical particles. So if the wind travels in their direction, depending on how strong the wind is, it will carry particles to them, and they can pick it up from very far away. Now, I have seen in the past before, while walking out in the bush, because while you're walking you pay very careful attention to your position with regards to the elephant's position or any animal that you might encounter. But obviously one of the things that you'd like to watch them behave naturally without disturbing them. And the moment they pick up on a scent being a very definite thing for them and making a very definite immediate assumption, especially with the scent of humans, they would certainly pick up those particles, and I've seen that happen over quite a far distance. Now I can see the way the zebra is walking, it looks like the wind is blowing over to the right hand side, more or less. And earlier on we had an elephant cow and a calf that was walking in the direction that the wind was traveling to. I didn't pay attention to the wind direction then, but they suddenly made a turn, and when they looked the other side there were some elephants approaching. Now what I would think is that it was very likely the scent of the elephants approaching that elephant cow picked up on, and that is over a considerable distance. For elephants, it's kind of like their superpower. plays a vital role in communication and finding food and other resources, sensing danger, navigating. And have a look at those zebra just standing out in the bare heat there. Interesting, all of them's got their ears down. Some of them are standing with their heads to the back sides of others. Zebra sometimes do that, and they kind of endure the flicking tail of the other one. That way it also aids them in minimizing the flies around the face. And the face having the soft, sensitive skin, often that's where the flies target. But it is interesting, the wildebeest and the zebra, two creatures that don't mind standing out in the open like this on a hot day. And also interesting about these two, both of them have markings, very unique markings. The wildebeest, or blue wildebeest as it's known, actually goes by another name as well, known as the brindled gnu. It's markings, almost stripe-like markings on the shoulders and the neck. And then zebras having black and white markings. Now, one of the theories for a long time with the black and white markings of zebra was that it aids in thermoregulation, with a difference in heat due to the way the black and the white absorbs and reflects the sunlight, creates microcurrents that travel across the body, and that way helps cooling the animal down. Now, I don't know that for sure about wildebeest, but I would wonder if it might have the same effect. You can see the younger ones and the females laying down. And the warthogs, looks like these two warthogs almost want to push each other around a little bit, maybe for a play fight, but I think on second thought they thought maybe it's a little bit hot. Rather keep our energy and move somewhere where we might find good food. I'm also thinking, with all the animals sitting and laying down like this, I know that you can see that there's a slight breeze growing across this clearing, and that might in part be why we have a few standing out like that. Just standing in the breeze, hoping that it might help them cool down a little bit. Judy, you were asking if there's any gemsbok in this area. Not that I'm aware of. I haven't seen any. There could be in the region that they are, but I am not too sure. I'm going to have to make sure for you about that. And then Wesley, you also asking which other animals have the ability to sleep, to stand and sleep. Elephants is one that comes to mind. Elephant, bull, and the cows, the larger ones especially, often you'll find standing in the shade of a tree, taking a short doze in the middle of the day. Yeah. And then Hillary, you are asking why hyenas don't seem to come down during the middle of the day. That is, like with other predators, it is very, very hot for them. So they tend to, and being active more at night when it's cooler, and also having senses that's better adapted to nighttime seeing, they tend to not come down as much during the day when it's hot. But Jamie, I'm very happy you enjoyed the show this afternoon, and I would like to thank all our viewers for joining us this afternoon. It was an amazing show. Got to see a lot of animals, and I really hope that you join us again tomorrow. But from all of us here at Wild Earth, a good afternoon.
Cost to wild animals. As a takeaway message, trophy hunting, the differences in acceptability of trophy hunting depend on several factors. Who you're talking to, where they're from, wherever they're coming from, is there any trophy hunting taking place, and different attributes of the hunt. Oftentimes when I listen to the news or I read newspaper articles, I hear people talking of a single rural African perspective. From the slides that I've just showed, and from the data that we're currently working on, there's no such thing. If someone speaks to you and says, talking about a single rural African perspective, don't listen. Now, the takeaway message is, sometimes people forget that Africa is not a country. It's a continent, that different communities and different countries embedded within Africa. It's really high time that everyone, including people in the global north and the global south, learn to realize that Africa is not a country, but a continent. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. I might have pressed back.
Thank you, Amy and Lovebo. Do we have any questions? Okay.
Could I please have the last slide, please?
Thank you for those interesting talks, and I was especially interested to hear about the African rural perspectives. In your discussions with the African respondents, I mean, you said that it depends on who does the hunting, who gets the revenue. Was there any sort of comment on the amount of hunting? So some sense that you can hunt some animals, but you can't do, that it needs to be sustainable. So was there any sort of consideration of numbers or seasons, the kind of factors that would affect whether the population of the animals would be affected in the long term?
Okay. The good thing is I'm not the only person here. I've got my team that are already on the crowd, sorry. But when I was in Wanga, I didn't hear that comment. I'm sure people are already thinking about numbers, but that didn't come out loud and clear in the discussions that we had with communities. Because one particular thing that we did after collecting this data, which we were not quite sure what it meant, we went back to these same communities and showed them what does this really mean. And that's not something that came out. There are some aspects of hunting that I didn't include today, but I'm happy to talk about after this presentation that came out, but that wasn't one of them.
Hi, yes, sorry. No, thank you for that information. There was a point that you mentioned about African universities stating that it's not the case that communities are receiving less than 3%. I think it would be quite important if we could maybe get some more information on that, because that's not seeming to be the case in Botswana. Botswana, there are many communities in the northern region that haven't even been receiving as much as 1% from trophy hunting. It is a huge issue, and I know everyone here pretty much knows a lot about it. It's been a big topic globally. But yeah, I think it would be quite interesting to know which universities, what studies, where they're getting this information from, because when you actually go and talk to the communities, that is not what is reported by them. And yes, just also wanting to know more a little bit about the proof of benefits that local communities are getting, and a little bit more information on that. Thank you.
Cool. I'm very aware of time, so we can definitely chat later, but not to gloss over it. To be very clear, the 3% tends to come from the groups who don't like trophy hunting, and they say only 3% goes to the communities. So we looked at what the evidence was in the published literature, and there are many case studies that aren't published out in the peer-reviewed literature, and that's a real gap, that people need to be publishing from all these different case studies, where it's 1%, where it's 90%, so that's reflected. So the key source of data for the revenue sharing was things like the African Leadership University report, that again was a collation of different sources looking at what was the revenue streams and how did it go to different stakeholders, including local communities in